Hello, welcome to the last day of the third Global Burnout Awareness Week. I'm Geri, Milters, the organizer of the event. It is a pleasure to have you here. If you're watching it live or if you're watching the recording, you're very welcome to be here. This is happening since Monday, January 16, with live broadcast on YouTube. We're hosting more than 20 panels in English and Portuguese with specialists in the subject and people who have experienced or are going through burnout. The purpose of this event is to promote trustworthy information about burnout, combating the stigma surrounding it, in addition to informing the public of the known causes, consequences, and recovery strategies. The theme of this edition is the struggle in the pursuit of dignity, addressing the social, organizational, and cultural dimension of workers' health, taking into account medical, psychological, and labor factors. During our last edition, last year, we had over 600 subscribers and panelists from 6 countries in both English and Portuguese, with more than 20 hours of free content openly available to the general public. This is a non-profit event and registration is free. We are grateful to the support of the Brazilian non-profit Instituto Bem-Estar, which translates to Wellbeing Institute. It's a Brazilian non-profit that promotes mental health. We appreciate your support and presence with us. I want to invite to the stage my dear friend and veteran of the Burnout Awareness Week. She's been here in every edition and will keep coming in every edition. Dr. Geri Puleo, PhD, researcher, amazing woman. She's been studying burnout for years, decades, and I have been mentioning her the whole week. So welcome, my dear Geri. It's so amazing to have you here.
Hello, my dear Carol. How are you doing today? And I so
Good.
applaud you for taking this idea of a Burnout Awareness Week several years ago and just keep building it and building it and building it. Because as you know, I believe that burnout is the number one thing that is debilitating employees and it's weakening companies. And it's causing a lot of customers to get really upset with the quality of the services and products of the companies whom they buy from. So thank you,
Yes.
thank you, thank you.
Yes. Geri, I want to invite you to a quick practice that we have been doing in every panel.
Okay.
And since
Okay, everybody,
we are,
this is a surprise. She didn't tell me about this before.
it was not on the previous script. So
Okay.
what we've been doing in every panel so far, and we will do until the closing panel that's going to happen today later, is we will take 1 minute of conscious breathing with everyone who's watching us.
I love
Yeah, I knew you would be on board.
Definitely.
So, and it's been really lovely, Geri, because we see the panelists also taking a moment to breathe, and leading by example is something that it's really powerful. So if you're watching, take this next minute to pay attention to the air filling your lungs, to the chair that you're sitting, the surface that you're at. If you want to close your eyes for a little bit, if you feel comfortable, otherwise just keep your eyes in a point that is in front of you. Just take a few breaths and realize that you're in the present moment. Whatever is before us and whatever is behind us doesn't matter now. We're just living in the present. Take a deep breath. And a deep exhale from the mouth. And come back. Open your eyes. And welcome. Now, yes.
Hi there.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks for jumping in and for joining.
I love it. I love it. I think what you're tapping on and what I found in my own research and in my own life, and probably many of the people who are watching this presentation are going to say, is that it didn't take a long time. But when you totally relax with it, it aligns everything. And suddenly the problems that you had before, there's still problems, but you don't view them at the same level as you did before. So I applaud you, Carol. I'll tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
So the title of our panel this year, because if for whoever's watching for the first time, Geri has been in the first, the second, and it's going to be on the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the 20th Burnout Awareness Week, always with us. We already need to plan it every year. We have to
Every
plan.
year
So,
ahead.
okay, what are we going to bring? What are we going to bring that to? And there's always something new because you're amazing. So our topic today is leaping into the void of the new normal without burnout. Your PhD is on burnout in change management. And I want you to start sharing what the findings of your research have been found in terms of burnout during change management, considering that the whole world has been going through change now and how that affects the whole working world.
Exactly. And I think what's interesting is when I first started my research on burnout during organizational change, what I thought was, okay, this is focused within a change management program. But what I discovered when I did my TEDx talk, and that's how you and I met because you had seen the talk, and I'm very proud to say I think we're over 620,000 views now, which is
amazing.
It's very humbling, and I'm very grateful. But it's also been on YouTube for a while, and the fact that we're still getting 1,000 to 2,000 views per week tells me that the burnout is consistent and it has not been resolved. And what I found with the feedback, like from people like you and other people who watch the TEDx talk, is that it's not just burnout during organizational change, it's burnout during work in general. And so it's got a little bit more. There's my smartphone as usual. It's more relevant to more things than what I thought it was. So if you'd like, I'm going to share my screen from a presentation that I did, which will be the BDoc model, because I think you mentioned that you've talked about it before during this, and although you are wonderful at describing, I'm sure people are like, I don't have a clue what this thing looks like. So let me share this. And okay, this is interesting because it's not permitting me to share. Let me try this. Let me try.
Yes.
Okay, you can
You're
see
that.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
Yes. There you go. I'm gonna put it on.
So let's make it a little bit bigger.
And here we are.
Now, this is the original BDoc model, okay? And you'll notice that during the stages of burnout, it starts at a very high level of hope. You know, these are the people who burn out are usually not the people who don't care. They're the employees who really care about what they're doing. They want to do good work, and they care about the company and their customers. But then through a series of organizational stressors, and I have a list of 10 of them, that hope starts descending into frustration. But they can still cope. If it continues, then you've got anger that starts happening. This is when you have a manager or a colleague in a meeting who suddenly just starts screaming at everybody around them and takes everybody by surprise. Right prior to the burnout, though, is apathy. And if I may use a little blue language in here, one of my participants in this original research said that I don't give a rat's ass. And it was legit. I've been doing research on gender differences in burnout. And there was one woman who had been promoted to a senior vice president, which required board approval in this very large company where she was working. And the person whom she reported to noticed is all of a sudden in meetings she was dead quiet. She just didn't say anything. She didn't care anymore, and that's not who she was. After she was promoted, this is what's really interesting, she immediately took a sabbatical for several months, came back, and quit her job because that's not the way she wanted to live. But that was critical because if you look at this model, the first steps towards recovery are physical or psychological removal. Physical can be leaving the job. Psychological is what we have now, quiet quitting, just doing the bare minimum. but it's creating that space so that you have the time to do what we just did at the beginning. Breathe, become aware. Once you do that, then it leads into greater self-knowledge and acceptance, not only of what happened to you, but also acceptance that it's okay and being kind to yourself. And then when that happens, it led to what I called a revised psychological contract with work. And basically, all that means is I'm going to do this for you, employer, but I expect this in return. Okay? You notice that this is lower than what it was with the initial hope. And I think many people in the workplace realize that they completed their education, they got their first job, they were energetic, they were hopeful, they were going to set the world on fire. And then what happened was it just kept getting worse and worse. They had a burnout. They started changing what they expected from their employers and from themselves. But you notice these little lines here? If I can show my cursor. This is something that I think is unique to this model. It's what I call residual burnout. The recovery process from burnout to the revised psychological contract takes a minimum of 2 years. 2 years. In my current research on gender differences, I found women who are 5 years out from the burnout producing situation. They've removed themselves. They've tried to engage in self-knowledge and acceptance, but they're still not recovered yet. As a result, something can happen and it triggers them right back into burnout. The residual burnout can go into a full-blown burnout, or it can go to any one of the preceding stages of burnout. And I think what's important with this model is, number one, it's process. And so in the workplace now, because I'm convinced that everyone is totally fried and burned out as a result of the pandemic, because I think the pandemic put in front of us that life is short. I want to be happy. Am I happy? Plus, many of the white collar workers were working from home. They didn't have that hour commute each way. Oh, they could take a walk. They could walk the dog. They could eat lunch, which often wasn't happening. And they started, and people started realizing, maybe I don't need everything that I thought I needed before. Move a few years forward in the pandemic, and people aren't wearing masks anymore. And I don't know if the pandemic is over or not. It depends on who you talk to. But what people started thinking was, okay, I've been working from home. I've been doing great work. I think even more importantly, I saved this company. Okay. Now all of a sudden, the CEOs are saying, time to come back into the office. And employees are saying, why? The CEOs generally say, because there's been several studies and surveys on this, they normally say, because if you're back at work, then we can create culture. And there have been numerous studies that have said just being in the same physical location does not create culture. And as a result, I think many people are saying, something, I can live on less money. I don't want this rat race. And I think what's even more important is the feeling of betrayal, that I've worked so hard during the pandemic, may not have had an office in my home, made all these adjustments. And you're thanking me by saying, well, you like working from home, tough. Now you got to come back into the office. And there's not a good reason why. It's a problem of leadership, quite frankly. Leaders are too autocratic and saying, you do as I say jump, you say how high. And the pandemic was a real line in the sand that employees started saying, no, I want to be treated like an adult. I want to be treated like a person, and I want to be treated with dignity.
One of the reasons why I have mentioned the B-Doc so many times throughout this week is because I think it shows exactly this part of the process of first the psychological and physical withdrawal from the stressor,
Yep.
which is something that sometimes people, they tend to underestimate the power of just leaving the stressor, and also the fact that you need to leave it psychologically, because if you're still
And
thinking
that's
about
the
it,
tough part.
oh
That's the tough
yeah, it
part.
is, because they keep texting you saying, so
Oh
when are
yeah.
you coming back, how are you doing, what can we
Hmm.
do, so and so
And,
wants to know how you're doing.
and I want to throw something out to that. Many leaders are taught to be empathetic and
Mm-hmm.
compassionate. They're taught the words to say.
Mm-hmm.
When are you coming back? Very simple. When are
Mm-hmm.
you coming back? 5 words, right? If I say to you, when are you coming back, Carol? You know, or if I say, when are you coming back? They're saying the words, but they don't have the emotion behind it. And we're all adults, and we can see when when someone is being inauthentic. And this is a challenge for leaders because this is a whole different way of leading. But here's the kicker, Carol. The research has been talking about servant leadership and compassionate leadership for decades. You want to go
Yes.
back even further. Hertzberg's motivator hygiene theory. Most leaders lead with a carrot and a stick. If you do well, we'll give you more money. But as you know, and I'm sure many of the people watching this know, you get to a point in the job, if you're not being treated with dignity and with respect, that you go, you couldn't pay me enough to stay in this job. Forget it. Those are hygiene factors. Motivators are internal. They
Yes.
come from feeling supported, a sense of belonging, a sense of being needed, a sense of being respected. And I've been teaching in universities for, I think it's now 16, 17 years. They don't teach this stuff, not in undergrad and not in MBA programs, because it's tough. It's the
Mm-hmm.
soft, squishy stuff. And the pandemic made us all realize that we are human beings. We have a life outside of work. You and I talked about this last week. At first with the Zoom meetings, it was you have your little suit on and you're all dressed. Women maybe even have
Mm-hmm.
their heels on and everything else. And then as a couple weeks later, then it's like, well, maybe I'll wear sweats or jeans. And then suddenly it's, well, I don't need to wear a suit. And then by the end of it, the cat was walking in front of the camera
Oh
and
yeah.
nobody was there, nobody blinked an eye. It made it more human. How can you go back to the rigidity that many corporations tried to create within their organizations? And you know what's really crazy about it? When companies are really rigid, how the hell can you be creative if you're in a box? And if you break outside that box, everybody points the finger at you and you're not a team
Oh
player and
yeah.
you just don't get it. So yeah, this pandemic, it was horrible. It was horrific. People lost their lives. But to the survivors, it started people on the slow recovery out of burnout. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
thought this pandemic was going to last this many years. But think about it. Quiet quitting, the great resignation, we're about 2 years out, 2 to 3 years out from the pandemic. I'm not surprised by any of this. I'm not surprised
Yeah.
by any of it.
So, and now that you mentioned these phenomena that are happening, the great resignation, the quiet quitting, how do you see that they are fostering change in the culture of work?
We're not going back to business as usual. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I've talked to many executives, even middle managers and employees that like, I can't wait till things get back to the way they were. We're not going back. There has been too big of a change and a shift that has happened. And we're in the no man's land of change. And BDOC becomes even more important because the change leaders tended to burn out in about 2 years. Now think about that, 2 years to burn out, 2 years for recovery. That's a 4 years of your life that you're feeling miserable. The change targets, or the ones that didn't have any control over it, usually burned out within 6 months, but it still took 2 years to recover. With an organizational change initiative, you have people who are leading it. Nobody led COVID. So everybody felt like a change target. I didn't want this. I wanted to go into work. I like to talk to people. I'm at home. I don't have an office. The dog's barking. The kids are crying. How am I going to homeschool? And it just went on and on and on. So it's led to this way of self-preservation to do the Great Resignation. And many times people resign during the Great Resignation because of burnout. It was ranked, I think, number one, the primary reason by 40% of people who were interviewed. And what did they do? They launched their own businesses, or they looked for something that gave them joy. Quiet quitting. I stayed in my job, but I've got a revised psychological contract with work. So I'm only going to do so much. No, you are not going to contact me at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon saying, oops, guess what? We've got a major project that's due Monday morning. Oh, you were going on a weekend vacation? Sorry. And you know what's interesting? Stuff like that happens in business. We all have to learn how to pivot. But what is critical for the employee is, how did my boss treat me when I made this sacrifice? Did they even acknowledge it? Did they say thank you? Most of the time it's like, hey, glad you did that. Here's your next project. I worked all weekend. Did you give me a day off? Did you do something nice for me? And going back to this theme, did you treat me with dignity?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, this isn't surprising. It really isn't.
And the other thing that I have been mentioning over and over again throughout this week is that there's the element that you cannot skip. It's something that we've talked about the last week. The self-reflection.
Yeah.
You cannot skip that. And we see, and that's the whole point why we have over 20 panels with different aspects of burnout.
Yeah.
Because there's no one size fits all. There's no one answer of, you need to do this. So this is your burnout recovery checklist. Go do that, and go do whatever I tell you to do. You need to have the self-reflection. And we are immersed in a culture of everything needs to be immediate. Everything needs to be, we're always late. Everything needs to be quick and easy.
We want to hack. We want to hack.
Yes, the hack.
I don't want to do the hard work. I want to hack. And I think that's the problem. What I found in my recent research on gender differences is, a lot of times you hear, just meditate. And many times
I heard that.
Yeah, many, it's just be quiet. You mean you can't be quiet for 5 minutes? With the implication, what's wrong with you? So someone tries to go straight into meditation for 5 minutes, they end up beating themselves up even more, because it's, what's wrong with me? Also, if someone was very physically active before the burnout, usually they quit exercising, okay? People who have tended to be very physically active, the meditation doesn't help them achieve the self-reflection and come out of burnout. They need to do the exercise. And then as they start feeling better physically, then it's, okay, now I'm going to do the meditation or the mindfulness or being present in the moment so that I can recover. Conversely, if you have someone who's a couch potato, or who it's like, I walked a mile this week and that's all they've ever done. That always surprised me, Carol. That always
here.
For me to tell you, Carol, every day on your lunch break, since you're working from home, go walk for a mile. That is the look that most people would give. The look that you just, it's like, I don't want to do that. This is torture. But instead, being able to just be quiet, or to work on centering, that usually works for them. And then as you become more kind of aligned psychologically and spiritually, then it's now I'm going to take care of the body, which is this
Yes.
vessel. And both approaches work, but you have to know yourself and you have to be patient. Um, I remember I talked to someone who was starting to take classes with the Zen master, and she looked at me and she said, "I am enlightened." I said, "Excuse me." Now, you got to realize I'm a practicing Buddhist, and enlightenment is not something that just happens. And she said that she was enlightened because the master gave it to her. Okay, what I think is so critical with this story. It's not like, boy, she's stupid, but this is someone who was striving but afraid to decide for themselves. And also, there's a sense of impatience. If it
Mhm.
doesn't work in, you know, 1 hour, then it must not be good. And I think that this is one of the reasons why people that I've worked with have been very frustrated. It's like, well, what do you mean it's going to take time? You're the
Yes.
expert. You should tell me how to get over it. Well,
Yes.
the first model I created was called the Burnout Triumvirate. And it's burnout's comprised of three things. There are organizational stressors or environmental stressors that contribute. But you notice some people excel in a high stress environment and other people don't. So you have certain personality traits that are also part of that. But the third thing for burnout are the physical manifestations. And it seems like in our society, it's only when something bad physically happens that we admit it. To
Yep.
say that I'm burned out, what is it? The Prime Minister of New Zealand just quit
Oh,
due to burnout.
yes.
This is big. This is really
Yes.
big and is bringing this to the forefront. In the people whom I've interviewed over the years who suffered burnout, over 15% of them were diagnosed with cancer shortly after they left the burnout producing situation. I'm not saying that burnout causes cancer, but there
Hmm.
is a correlation because of the cortisol and all the other things surging through your body.
Yeah.
I had one woman who went to the dentist because she was grinding her teeth so badly, she developed bone spurs in her jaw. I've had other people have severe anxiety attacks that mimicked heart
Hmm.
attacks. Um, I've had other people that their whole bodies just kind of broke down. Now, in Europe, they're talking about this more. A lot of times they call it adrenal fatigue. Here in the United States, it's like, well, we can't call it that. We have to call it something else. Even though the World Health Organization identified burnout as a workplace phenomenon from unmitigated chronic stress. It's real. But the problem
Hmm.
is when you tell someone I'm burned out, most of the times, even your close friends or family roll their eyes and say, "Suck it up, buttercup."
Yeah.
This is the real world. If you can't take the heat,
Yes.
get out of the kitchen. It's like, no. Or don't blame your boss. It's all you. No, it's
Hmm.
it's this, this almost like trifecta of the physical, the personality traits, and the organizational stressors themselves. And I think during the pandemic, when people were separated from it, suddenly they became aware. It's like, oh my God, all this stuff has been happening. I didn't even realize it. And the good thing is they're not going back. So yeah, in the post-pandemic world, it's a new normal. And
Yeah.
the beauty of it is that organizational leaders are in a position to create something a lot better than what it was in the past. But it takes courage
Yes.
and vulnerability.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes. So you've mentioned that um, the judgment when you say that you're burned out. And one thing that I've mentioned last year as well is, especially in everything we read in English,
Hmm.
burnout has been used as a synonym to being tired, as a
Hmm.
synonym for fatigue or
Yeah,
frustration.
yeah.
So you look for articles and news articles and posts and stuff, and then
Mm-hmm.
there's feeling burned out, and then burned out is like, you had a bad experience, you had a bad day
Mm-hmm.
at work, now you're feeling
Mm-hmm.
burned out.
Mm-hmm.
I also talked to Professor Leiter about this on
Yeah.
Wednesday, and I also wanted to have your input on
Sure.
how can we, because my main concern is when you do that, you
Mm-hmm.
take away the experience of people who are actually struggling in the 2 year down the rabbit hole, and the other 2 to 3, 5 years up and back again, because there are people who have to
Yeah.
take sick leaves, who will be unemployed so many times, will be financially vulnerable so many times. So how can we have an ethical way of understanding burnout that is not just I'm tired? How do you see
Well,
it?
and Leiter and Maslow are kind of like the gurus of burnout. So I'm very impressed that you had Michael as a part of this. Um, their model of burnout is different from mine because they identify the burnout itself. So it's high levels of cynicism and depersonalization, high levels of exhaustions, and low efficacy or low productivity. In contrast, my model was more the process of it. They're not different, they're totally intertwined.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is post pandemic, many employees suddenly had the realization that their employers are not going to help them with this. They're going to have to find a way to do it, which in my original research that led to the BDOC model, what that meant was they left their jobs. A lot of them left their careers altogether. And I had spoken to a chemist who was fried in chemistry, left, went for a 1 year sabbatical, and she's now a life coach. She said, same thing's happening because she hadn't made those changes in the way she views work. I
Yes.
think that ethically now, and if you want to get it from a bottom line business reason, um, it's not just the line workers who are burned out or the middle managers. It's also the senior executives and the CEOs. And it's a way of really being able to look at the processes in your company and asking in a very humble way, is this working or isn't this working? You've heard of Dr. Phil, the psychologist. His big thing is, in some of the stuff he says I like, some of the stuff I don't. But the one question he always asked was, so how's that working for you? Yeah, I've been working with some manufacturing companies, and in the manufacturing sector, turnover's crazy. I mean, crazy. They can't maintain workers once they've been hired. And a lot of times it's just changing the processes. It's training the leaders that leadership does not mean being a dictator. Leadership is a collaboration. These are not children, these are adults, and they've got experiences. And here in the States, we have, HIPAA violations in terms of privacy with health and all that. But I think what it comes down to is getting down to the brass tacks of the tasks of the organization. Simon Sinek talks about finding the why. This is very similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Their burnout had not been identified when Maslow was doing his research. I think it was about 15 years after that by Freudenberger. But what Maslow found is people who were self-actualized. They could put in long hours. They could sacrifice a sense of belonging. They could do all of these things and they didn't burn out because they had this purpose. They knew what their goal was. And I think that in the new normal, what can be created is a more collaborative environment between the workers and the leaders, where leaders are not afraid to say, how can I help you? And employees are empowered to say, I don't know, but this is how I feel. Because now employers will ask, I was watching a thing on Gen Z or millennial workers, and many times the managers don't know how to manage them. And they ask them what they want, but the reality is that they don't really know what they want or what they need. But in today, in society pre-pandemic, you never said you didn't know. That
Yeah.
was no, no, no. And to say I don't know opens the door to real dialogue. And that's also with organizational change. Instead of senior leaders saying, this is how we're going to change the whole organization, and I've never done your job, and you're a frontline worker, but I'm going to tell you what's better. Why don't you ask the frontline workers? Many years ago, I had done a workshop on change management, and I had a COO look at me, and he's doing one of these things. And he said, not once did you ever talk about communication. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I've got about 10% of the slides are talking about the ability to communicate. And I said, what do you mean? He said, we always communicate with our employees. We send out newsletters and let them know what's going to happen. And I sat
Sure.
there and I
Well
said,
done.
yeah, I said, that's a one-way monologue. You need communication is a dialogue. And he said, well, you're telling me that before we do something like major, we should talk to the people it's going to impact. I said, yes. Well, but they'll come up with the same answer, and we need to be efficient. And we don't want to waste time. I said, but here's the difference. I'm going to tell you what to do. You going to do it? Probably not. But if I ask your opinion and you come up with the same thing, you've got buy-in, and you're probably going to do it. I remember this guy just looked at me, and he was, oh, so sending out newsletter. I said, that's one-way communication. That's a monologue. You need to
Yeah.
talk to one another. And the pandemic, when you start seeing people, women especially, and not you in this situation, but a lot of times I'm going to put my glasses on because I'm tired and maybe nobody can see, or maybe I'm going to wear their baseball cap, or it's okay if my kitty comes walking across. It made it more human. We
Oh yeah.
can't go back to this kind of a bureaucratic hierarchy. So I guess, I don't know if I've answered your question or not, but I think what it really comes down to is the vulnerability and the curiosity to understand both sides and work together collaboratively.
Yeah.
That will overcome a lot of the fatigue and the exhaustion. You know what I mean?
So you have mentioned the self-actualization, and I want you to share with us the revised BDOC model,
Revised
which is
veto. Okay.
fascinating. You have talked about it last year. So whoever's watching who watched this last year, you have
Okay.
mentioned it, and
Okay. Now I'm going to
now
show it to you.
there's news. Yes.
There we go. Let's see. I think I did entire screen last time.
Yes.
Okay, everybody can see it? Okay.
There we go. Yes.
This is what to me was extremely exciting because let's be honest, I'm going to go through 2 years of frying, 2 years of recovery, and I'm going to have a revised psychological contract with work. That's not really very sexy, and that's not really
Yeah.
very motivational. What I found in interviewing women who have burned out, they went beyond the revised psychological contract with work. I think this is where quiet quitting comes in, which is what we're experiencing now, where people are saying, no, I'm not going to take on these extra projects. No, I have a life.
Mm-hmm.
What I found with these women is they actually went into Maslow's hierarchy of needs at the highest level for self-actualization. They took care of themselves. They were focused on what was important to them. And I think what's really exciting about this is once this self-actualization starts happening, they're at the same initial level of hope or even higher than what they were prior to the burnout. People who are on the road to self-actualization are a lot happier. They know what's important. They know how to identify their priorities. And probably most importantly, in terms of recovery from burnout, they know how to set boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
in the revised psychological contract with work, we're talking about boundaries. What is
Mhm.
quiet quitting? Boundaries.
Yeah.
There is also the, hold on, let me get back in here. There is also something called it's quick quitting,
Mhm.
which is you hire somebody, they show up the first day and it's sayonara, not going to see you anymore. And managers are like, we don't understand why. And they're quick quitting. It's like, I know what my boundaries are. I was told one thing in the job interview, meaning they did not get a realistic job preview. I started the
Mhm.
job and said, this is not what I want. I'm out of here. The professionals actually resign and give notice. The other ones just ghost them because
Mhm.
they don't want the conflict or anything else. But, I think that's where we are in terms of burnout as a nation and burnout as a country. We're in that revised psychological contract with work. And I think because this pandemic is still going on at this point, they don't want to do a residual burnout. Many of these people say, I'm not going
Mhm.
back there. And so they're getting stronger, they're getting more courageous. They're able to say no. And they're becoming more willing to sacrifice for that.
Mhm.
I was making six figures before. You know something? I don't need six figures to live. I want something else. So I'm going to change it. And I'm going to say no to. I have a good friend of mine who is a cybersecurity specialist, and he's launched his own company. And he said, Geri, I have 25 employees. They're all around the world. And a headhunter approached him and said, we have a great job for you. And he said, oh, really? I'll listen to it. Well, you have to come on site. In the office, he said, I'm not doing it anymore. And one thing he mentioned, and there's been some talk about this, it's called career cushioning.
Mhm.
Employees are no longer just looking at their employer to provide all their livelihood. That trust has been abolished. When this pandemic started, I remember I wrote a blog post and I said to all the leaders out there, watch what you're doing during this pandemic and how you treat your employees because they are watching and they're going to determine if they want this or they're going to go to something else. Career cushioning is the side gig, um, those types of things. And a lot of people are doing it now because it's like, no, I'm not going to lose my job, or oh, it's layoffs, don't take it personally, it has nothing to do with you, but hey, you don't have a job anymore and we're going to give you
Yeah.
help, and then you're going to have to pay through the nose for your health insurance. Remember, this is us. um, but instead they're saying, I want something else so that I have something that I can fall back on. And it's not the hustle culture that it was before. It's more
Mhm.
of the, I love what my side hustle is, and it re-energizes me and I can bring that back to work. It's also that fail safe that in case something happens, I do have something else that I can just ramp up. It's a whole new world out there right now. Not going back to business as usual. Not.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also, it's a lot of the experience that someone who goes through burnout
Yeah.
as well. It's the uncertainty,
Oh yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
there's no there's not a prescribed path. There's
Right.
many roads that you can take, and you can shift roads in the middle of the path, but there's not exactly one way to it, and that
Yeah.
can create
It
a
isn't.
lot of angst. Yeah, can create a lot of anxiety. But once you learn how to deal with that, it can also be very powerful.
Extremely. And I think that's very good that you pointed that out. There is no one path. There are no quick cures. I can share what the people I've interviewed have used, and that you have to create your own. And I think there's also a lot of guilt. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it goes, there's shaming, definitely. But sometimes it almost goes to self-hatred for someone who's burned out. It's me. Something's wrong with me. And then when you say, okay, self-reflection, and there is no one path, it can cause a lot of panic because I screwed up so badly because I burned out and I don't trust myself. And by the way, I want to be out of this in at least 1 month because I have other things to do.
Uh-huh.
It's that patience. It's that patience because what I found is that the universe, and I think this is where residual burnout comes in. Once you think you've got it and you've
Oh
recovered,
yeah.
yeah, it's like the universe comes in and goes, boom, there we go. Here's something.
No.
How are you going to respond to that? And what I found is once you get it, even though these normally very high stress producing situations occur, you sit there and take that breath, center for that minute and go, I've been there before. I choose not to go back there.
Yes.
And I'd like to say, and then at that point, everybody's enlightened, you've attained nirvana. Now, universe comes in with, okay, you've crossed that hurdle. Now, just wait a little bit, something else will come in your path. And I think it's that understanding that life is full of good and it's full of bad. And I think people are no longer settling for toxic workplaces. They want to choose things that are much more empowering to
Yeah.
them. And that is extremely powerful. It's throwing a lot of managers and leaders a curveball that they don't know how to handle that. Okay. But if you look at companies like Patagonia, if you look at progressive companies who genuinely care about their employees, they will weather any economic storm that comes in their path. And is it scary? Yeah, you got to be vulnerable. It's Brene Brown. You've got to be vulnerable. And I think the fear for many people is, I'm in such a toxic workplace. How can I be vulnerable in that? Well, if you're in the midst of a toxic workplace, being that vulnerable can be used against you. You got to be aware of that. But that's
Yeah.
when you do the psychological or physical withdrawal so that you can find the time to take care of you. And I think what employers need to realize is that, when you're on a plane and you're traveling with a child, in the case of turbulence, and the oxygen mask comes out, put it on yourself first before the child. And I found with the women who have burned out, they had 3 personality traits. And one of them was the people-pleasing nurturer. They would fall on their swords for their teams. They would not delegate something that should be delegated because they thought that employee had too much on their plate. They were very loved by their employees. And they ended up basically killing themselves. They really did, because some of the experiences that these women have had they're gut wrenching, absolutely gut
Mm-hmm.
wrenching. Yeah. So I don't know if I spun off in answer to your
No,
question.
no.
I probably did, but that's okay.
But it's always amazing to listen. So you've said there's the people pleasing nurturer,
Mhm.
and then the
Yeah. Let me
what are
move
the
this.
other two?
Yeah. This is what I call the
I would
trifecta.
love to listen to that as well. Yeah.
I'm going to pull this up. Okay. I'm going to share again. Okay. This is what I call the trifecta
Yes.
of a burned out woman. I mentioned the nurturer, but the very first thing that I found for women who burn out, and it's going to be fascinating when I start interviewing the men in the second quarter of
Mm-hmm.
this year, these were the overachievers. There is nothing wrong
Mm-hmm.
with high achievement, but overachievers don't know when to stop. They beat themselves up. Now, what's interesting, what I found with these women is the women were not perfectionists. They knew when something was good enough, but they just kept pushing,
Mm-hmm.
pushing, pushing. Okay. Many times the cultures in organizations really support that because that means you're a star performer.
Yes.
That means you're great. So they're the overachievers. And then they become the people-pleasing nurturer. Now, why do I have marionettes here? Because everybody is in the negative way manipulating them, um, because they don't take care of themselves. They may be afraid to discipline one of the subordinates who report to them. But the bottom line is they want everybody to like them. They're Earth Mama. Okay. Now you've got that with the overachievement. That's not necessarily when the burnout comes into play. It's only when this third part of the trifecta comes in, which is the armored warrior. Now, this was amazing to me because I've always owned my own businesses and I really never did this. But a lot of the women whom I interviewed brought this up, and then I talked to friends of mine. The armored warrior is we put on a front when we're engaging with anybody outside of our team. We are tough, we are strong. Then we come back and we're the Earth Mama people pleasing nurturer with the team. And then we have this high overachievement that goes into play. It's when all three of these things come together: the overachiever, the people pleasing nurturer, the armored warrior. You got cognitive dissonance going on. Nothing is aligned, nothing is honestly authentic because it's
Mm-hmm.
all different parts. And how do you align it? And if you're not aligned, you're stressed out. So this is what I call the trifecta of a burned out woman. And it's going to be fascinating to see if the men do the same thing. Now, some people might be, men are not people pleasing nurturers. I don't know about that. I don't know. It'll be very interesting. So hopefully for next year's conference,
Yes.
I'll have information on um, the personality traits that make men more susceptible to burnout.
Amazing. My dear, it's always amazing to talk to you, to listen to you, and I hope the people who are watching are also
Always a
enjoying
pleasure,
that.
dear. Always a pleasure. Always.
I want to finish by
Hmm.
asking you what we have been asking to all of the
Hmm.
panelists throughout this week. What does dignity mean to you? Dignity at work mean to you?
Well, this is interesting because I've talked about it, and I've thought a lot about, if you treat someone with dignity, they normally don't burn out because you understand when they need time off or when there's too much on their plate. Um, in the presentation that I've been pulling the slides from to share, I came up with advice to leaders on how to create this new normal. And this is something that I call FEEL. Now, FEEL is an acronym, but it also gets back into being very human. FEEL stands for having flexibility. You got to learn how to pivot. Things happen. It's how you deal with it.
Yeah.
Have empathy, not sympathy with, oh, poor you. I know that you have, 5 kids and your husband just got laid off, but you think you can come in this weekend? That's not
Hmm.
empathy. Empathy is
Hmm.
understanding and appreciating what someone else is going through. Also, evolution. Nothing is static, everything is temporary. And I think what COVID taught all of us: life is short. All those 5-year strategic plans. And I was used to, yeah, and all of this stuff and the detailed analysis, COVID came in and everything got thrown out the window. You have to realize that life is change, and that's good. Change can be scary, but do you really want to have the mindset you had when you were 6? I don't think so. The
Good
only thing I
point.
do wish is I wish I had the physical body when I was 21, but the wisdom and
Yeah.
maturity that I have now, I think it's a great cosmic joke, you know what I mean? But you have to be willing to evolve and to say, okay, this no longer works, moving into something else. And then finally, you got to listen. You have to listen Because most people, especially the overachievers, even though these women were people-pleasing nurturers, oftentimes when you talk to them, you could see their minds working like, I'm not thinking what I'm going to say next. And we've all been in
I'm
business
laughing
meetings.
because I know someone. I have
Oh,
a
yeah.
friend. Yes,
Oh,
very
yeah.
close friend.
Who shall remain nameless. But I think that people don't know how to listen. Or they do the yeah. Let's get on to the point. And someone's trying to get a point across because it's important to them. And listening is not only with your ears, it's also with your eyes. If I say to you, Carol, by the way, I need you to have this project done by Saturday afternoon. Is that okay? And you go, sure. Oh, good. Thank you. I'm glad you're willing to do it. No, that the body language and the tone of voice was saying, I guess I have to. I don't really want to. And so it's listening with your ears. It's listening and gaining information through your eyes, and it's also really watching the body language and the tone of voice. Um, Trust your gut. If you're talking to
Mm-hmm.
somebody and they're saying everything that seems right, but something inside of you is going, I don't know about this.
Mm-hmm.
Trust it. Engage in a dialogue, ask additional questions so that you can fully understand. And I think the other thing that doesn't fit into this feel model of flexibility, empathy, evolution, and listening is that you need to be able to pivot. And the only way you can pivot is if you let go of your assumptions. Don't assume. Don't assume you know what other people want. Don't assume. And assumptions are toxic. And I think that's what's contributing to the current problems that are in a lot of workplaces. The CEOs are demanding everybody come back to the office, and their reason, even though it's been debunked by study after study, is it builds culture. It doesn't. That's not what builds culture. That assumption needs to be let go of so that
Yeah.
there can be a dialogue. And ideally, you want employees who are energized, who are engaged, and want to be there. But in return, they expect respect, they expect empathy, they expect compassion, and they expect dignity.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, my pleasure.
Please reach out to Geri. She's on LinkedIn. Your website is jpuleo.com.
Yeah,
And
that
there's also
there.
a new way to work.
Yeah, there's a new way to work, which has hyphenations
Mm-hmm.
in front of each of the words. That's the blog for individuals that focuses on
Mm-hmm.
how to work differently on an individual basis. I also have another blog called Change Without Burnout, which is directed more towards leadership to provide tools to create the change that you want. Gapaleo.com is kind of like my homepage for everything me. And the best way, though, to reach out to me is via LinkedIn, which is Geri
Yes.
Puleo, PhD, SPHR. So SPHR stands for Senior Professional in HR. So, but anyways, Carol, I want to
Amazing.
congratulate you again. I'm very, very proud of you, my dear. You do.
Thank
This is
you.
such a worthy event that you put on each year. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to say again, I might have said it last week, last year, 2 years ago, but I'm going to say because it's always a good time to say that to whoever isn't aware of that yet. I have decided to start investigating burnout and to understand it better with
Yeah.
Geri's TED Talk. And
Oh,
when I reached out to her, and she was nothing but warm and everything everyone have seen in the last hour. And when we meet virtually, we have never met in person yet,
no, we've never been
which
on the same continent.
debunks. Yes, exactly. So it debunks the whole, you need to be present you
Exactly.
need to be present in other ways. We talk for hours and hours on, and I have said that to you already, and I want to say that in public. You have changed my life, because I would not be doing this. Nothing of this would be happening if I hadn't stumbled upon your TED Talk, and if you hadn't been as warm and nice and loving and amazing with your work. So
Well, and
thank you
also,
for that.
and also, my dear friend, never discount all the hard work and self-reflection that you yourself have done.
Yes. Yes, that is correct. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my
I
dear.
will see you guys. So this is our last panel in English for this year. I'll see you next year. And if you speak Portuguese, in an hour, we'll be back for our last two panels of this year. I'm already missing
Fabulous.
this.
Fabulous.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.